Hey everyone, Miss Chacon here. So we are going to do a project over Braille. And we should have already talked about what you guys think about Braille and what you already know about Braille. So we're going to read this biography about Louis Braille, and it's called Six Dots. And then I'm going to give you a challenge associated with Braille. So this is by Jen Bryant. It's a story of young Louis Braille. Here is the Braille alphabet, which you should have a printout on your table as well. Okay. On the day I was born, Papa announced me to the village. Here's my son, Louis. The neighbors came, clucking their tongues, whispering, too small, he won't survive. But I did survive. I was a curious child, and my eyes studied everything. Mama's gentle face, lace draping my cradle, the smooth shape of a bread loaf on the table. I grew strong and healthy when I rode to the baker's on my brother's broad shoulders or fed the chickens with my sisters. The villagers waved and smiled. So handsome, they cried. And clever, too, my sisters said. At 3, I knew everyone in Couvray by name. I think that's a city in France. I counted the eggs in my sister's basket and the sparrows in the trees. I repeated stories I heard, word for word. But what I loved most was to watch Papa work. People came from far away to have a harness made or a broken bridle mended. In Papa's hands, the rough leather strips became smooth and useful. I wanted to be just like him. But when I reached for a tool, no touch pa, don't touch that, Papa warned. Then more gently, you're too small yet, Louis. Wait until you're older. Too small, those words. I wanted to be bigger, stronger, older. Perhaps if I showed Papa what I could do. The leather was smooth. The owl was sharp. The owl is like a very sharp tool. I knew just how to pa 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 pa. My life changed that day. A healer bandaged my eye. The owl went into his eye. Again, I heard, no touch pa, don't touch. But the bandage itched so much. My hands, like the sparrows in the trees, were small and quick. I couldn't keep them away. I didn't mean to make things worse, but I did. The infection spread to my other eye until I could see nothing at all. No trees or sparrows, no faces, no lace or loaves of bread. By the time I turned 5, I was completely blind. The villagers whispered, poor Louis Braille, what a clever boy. What will happen to him now? My world was dark and dangerous. I stumbled about the house, banging into the chairs, the walls, the door. My body ached. Where's the sun? I cried. But the sun did not come. I sat by the window, training my ears to do what my eyes could not. Clang, bang, kish, kish. This was Papa in a shop. Swish, swish, swoosh, swish. Long-skirted ladies hurrying to the market. Clomp, 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 clomp. Soldiers marching down the street. Grr, grr, ruff, ruff, grr. The neighbor's angry dog chained too tight. Alone in the dark, I knew just how he felt. So because he can't see, he is focusing more on hearing and can hear more things. My family did what they could. Papa made a wooden cane. Each day I walked a little farther. Tap, 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 tap. Counting the steps between the house and the garden, the vineyard and the chicken coop, the baker's and the miller's, and back to Papa's shop. My brother taught me to whistle. I ain't even gonna try to whistle, y'all. It ain't gonna happen. And when the sound echoed back, it warned me of things in my path. So he could whistle and he could tell if there was something in front of him. My sisters made a straw alphabet. Papa made letters with letter strips or by pounding round-top nails into boards. With Maman, I played dominoes, counting the dots with my fingers. Now remember what this story's called. 6 dots. The village priest taught me to recognize trees by their touch, flowers by their scent, and birds by their song. I listened closely as he read to me from the Bible and books of poetry. Do you have any books for blind children? I asked. No, Louise, the principal said. I'm sorry. The priest said, I'm sorry. When I was older, I went to school with the other village children. All day, as I wrote down words and numbers or read out loud from printed pages, I sat in the front row listening and memorizing. Do you have books for blind children? I asked again. No, Louis, the teacher replied. I'm sorry. But I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I just wanted to read and to write on my own like everyone else. The Marquis, a noble lady living by, heard about me. She wrote a letter to the Royal School for the Blind, asking if I could study there. Finally, a reply came. Bienvenue. Welcome, Louis. The priest says they have books for the blind, I told Papa excitedly. But you're only 10, Mama cried. And you'll live there for most of the year, my brother added. Paris is a big city far away, my sisters warned. How could I make them understand? Without books, I would always be poor Louis Brel. I would always be held back, like that dog chained too tight. I love you, I told them, but I have to go. I didn't need my eyes to know that the royal school in Paris was not a palace. My hard bed was in a damp, crowded room. My uniform itched. My meals were small and cold. Remember, this is all a true story, guys. The teachers were strict. The older boys teased and stole. How I missed my home. And yet I stayed. I stayed because somewhere in this old, moldy building, there were books for the blind. Only the best students are allowed to read them, my friend Gabriel told me. Then I will be one of the best, I replied. Learning at the blind school was almost like learning in Couvray. We sat and listened, we memorized and recited. We also had music lessons and made slippers in the workshop. As my fingers flew across the organ tree keys or between strips of cloth, I dreamed of reading and writing. I worked and studied as hard as I could. Finally, it was that day. A guide led me to the library. Asseyez-vous ici. Sit here, he commanded. There was a shuffling, grunting, a scraping, a thud. Voila, there it is, he said. Just trace the raised letters with your fingers. It was a long reach to the top of page 1. My fingers traced the outline of each letter, just as I did in Couvray with straw and leather. But these waxy letters were huge. After reading the first sentence in this way, my hand was halfway down the page. A few sentences more, and I had to turn the page. A few more sentences, 2 more pages, and then the end. C'est tout? Is that all? I asked. There are more, the guide said, but they're just like this one. Words as large as my hand, sentences that took up half a page. I sighed. Even if I read 100 books like this, how much could I learn? I skipped supper. I lay in bed wishing I was home. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed that the neighbor's angry dog broke free. He ran to me, licking my face until I laughed and laughed. Louis, Louis, lève-toi, get up. Gabriel shook me awake. It was morning. The headmaster wants us. Let's go, allons. Everyone had gathered in the big room. Dr. Pignet spoke. A French army captain has invented a code to send secret messages during battle. The code is read by touch, not by sight, so we might use it here too. You're each holding a message written with patterns of dots, the headmaster continued. Each pattern stands for a sound, such as oo or in or ch. We listened as he explained. It wasn't easy. There was a lot to remember. Flipping my page over, I moved my fingers from left to right, feeling the dots. Fall back, I shouted. Everyone laughed. It was a battle order, of course, but now my heart pounded with hope. I asked for another. Again, I touched the dots. Supplies arrive at dawn. Oui, yes, the headmaster cried. The others shouted out their messages too. How are the messages written? I asked. The headmaster handed me a slate, which is a wooden frame with a metal piece in the middle. Slide your paper underneath, he explained. Now take this stylus, but be careful. This sharp tool was like the awl in Papa's shop. Right there. This sharp piece he got stuck in his eye. I shivered. Use it to punch the code into the paper, he said. I made a few of the complicated dot patterns, then flipped the paper over to read them by touch. For many weeks, I practiced. Reading by touch using dots was a brilliant idea, at least on the battlefield. But for us, the code was so hard that everyone else in the school had given up. Even a short message takes so many dots, and I can't fit a single symbol under my finger, I complained to Gabriel. Plus, the captain's code stands for sounds, not letters. So what? My friend replied. So why shouldn't we spell words and write sentences like sighted people do? I argued. This code was a start, but it wasn't nearly good enough. We, the blind, were being held back. Would the captain work on improving it with me? I asked the headmaster. I'm sorry, Louis, he isn't interested, he replied. Sorry, that word. Long ago, I had watched Papa take rough leather strips and make them useful. Now I knew what I had to do. Late at night, while the others slept, I bent over my slate and punched the pages. I tried hundreds of ways to simplify the captain's code. I worked until my back was stiff and my fingers ached. Often I fell asleep a few minutes before morning. A year passed, then another, then another. That winter, I turned 15. I was often sick, but I wouldn't rest. Finally, it was ready to test. I asked the headmaster to choose something from his own library, a book I had never heard before. Please read it out loud, I said. Dr. Pinier began. After a few minutes, I interrupted. You can go much faster, sir. As he read, I copied down the words, spelling each one correctly. My new code used just 6 dots arranged in 2 columns like dominoes. Each dot pattern stood for a letter of the alphabet. Fini, said Dr. Pinier when he reached the end of chapter 1. Finished. I turned my pages over. Reading by touch, I recited the entire chapter. Louis, tu l'as fait, you did it, he shouted. Word spread quickly. The other students rushed to try it. Si facile, so easy. Et si vite, and so fast. We can read words and write letters like everyone else. As my friends traded messages, I remembered watching Papa in his shop, bent over the rough strips of leather and making them useful. I had become like him after all. So he actually invented this language so that people who cannot see can read and write. And I think that's just so amazing and inspiring. And then in the book, there's some extra information about Louis Braille. This was in the 1800s. Yes, 1800s when this happened. So guys, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to go over how we're going to do a STEM challenge with Braille. And I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.